Hello there, John Couturiello here, the counsellor of your listener. Thank you for joining me for this episode. As per usual, thank you to everyone who makes it possible for me to live my vision every day, be you a client who allows me the privilege of entering into your life to help you with your goals, or as a supporter or listener of the podcast. Thank you to everybody. Today I'm going to be discussing the topic of independence as a virtue, and specifically some of the nuances in this particular subject. Now, as per usual, if you have any concerns of your own, please do not take what you find on the internet as advice. Always seek advice from a professional. Independence in the right form, and in the right form is a key operative phrase here, which I'm going to address shortly, is a phenomenon about which I'm incredibly passionate, and I'm incredibly adamant about promoting the idea of every single person developing as much of the right independence skills as they possibly can. And the reason for this is that there are certain skills in life, certain abilities to be able to do certain work or complete certain tasks for yourself from which everyone can benefit. This may seem obvious, but it astounds me the number of people who don't know how to do certain things for themselves. And it also astounds me just how many people might justify not having to know how to do those things. And I'm going to address some reasons for that in a minute, but there are certain types of knowledge that even if you don't use it, it's still beneficial to have it in the event that you do. Think about some of the common things that anyone might be able to do for themselves. How to cook for themselves, and especially tend to their personal nutrition. How to care for their home, how to undertake basic home repairs and maintenance, management of utilities and services. How to shop for the best deal on your utilities. How to choose the right groceries. How to choose the right products for your home. How to manage finances, how to choose wisely how to spend your money, how to seek someone to help you invest your money when you need to, how to care for your own health, how to make decisions, how to research before making decisions, how to analyze information with a critical and objective mind so that you're not swayed by other people's agendas, how to make decisions with a view to the long-term benefit and not simply short-term gratification, how to be self-satisfied, and how to know when you need to take responsibility for something and know when you need to change yourself, and when to be satisfied with yourself and know that you're doing what's right. How to analyze information in the world around you so that you are analyzing it as objectively as possible and not being swayed because other people want to get something from you. And some of the ones that are not discussed as often, how to defend yourself and how to survive in tough times. Depending on where you attend school, some schools might teach some of these skills in a somewhat random manner throughout different subjects. But as far as I know, there aren't a lot of mainstream schools that systematically teach these subjects consistently. Teaching these skills systematically would mean throughout every year level, showing children how to cook, and not just having it as a one-off subject for one semester. How to actually cook nutritious food, how to effectively take care of a home, how to make financial decisions. There are some countries in the world where learning skills like self-defense, martial arts is actually mandatory practice throughout school. There are actually some countries in the world in which children learn critical thinking as a subject, where they're exposed to media rhetoric and then the teacher shows them where all the rhetorical techniques are and how the media is essentially trying to sway them for the benefit of the system and not necessarily for their own best interests. Those are the sorts of things that people often take for granted. We think, yeah, of course, everyone knows that the media tries to sway you. Everyone knows that this is a fact or that that's not true. But as I've said in the past, ideas don't become popular and commonly accepted because they're true. They become popular and commonly accepted because they play on people's emotions and what people want to hear. So while some ideas might be popular and true, often there is a lot of exaggeration and a lot of distortion in what is considered popular thought. And everyone takes it for granted that everyone has that skill. In reality, most people don't. And that's because they haven't been taught it. They haven't been taught it because, as I've said in the past, school is just part of a system that wants people's consciousness to work for them. But proper critical thinking skills can be learned. You just have to put in the effort and know where to look. And you can develop them yourself if you want to. And a lot of people seem to turn a blind eye sometimes to just how important these skills are. A lot of people rely on interdependence, and they say, well, when I'm older, I'll get married and so my wife or my husband can take care of this. I don't need to know how to do it. Or I'm living with my parents at the moment. They know how to do all this. I don't need to know how to do it. I can just go about my life. Or, oh, don't worry, the government will take care of me. I don't need to know these skills. In reality, sometimes the only time you can say that a job is truly done is when you have personally done it yourself and when you have seen the outcome, examined the outcome, and known for yourself, this is exactly what it should be. Interdependence is an important topic, and this is where the nuance comes into this subject. Marriage very much has an important place in our society, and the traditional family unit whereby one person cares for the children and the other person works can be incredibly important when it's practiced correctly. And by correctly, I mean where everyone is entering into it with consent and where each person has a role for themselves that they have conscientiously chosen. They haven't simply blindly followed what tradition says, but they have thought about it and decided for themselves that this is the choice that I want to make. But even in a traditional marriage, in which roles are very clearly defined, even if both parties to the marriage have chosen that lifestyle as a deliberate choice, it is still in every person's best interest that they know how to survive on their own. The reasons for this are quite simple. You never know when you as an individual may be left alone to fend for yourself. Horrible things can happen in life. You don't want them to, and you can plan to prevent certain things from happening, but you can never guarantee what's going to happen in life. And it is never wasted for you to know how to take care of yourself if all else fails. In fact, an analogy I sometimes use is ask yourself, if I was to land in the middle of the jungle with absolutely nothing with me, would I be able to survive with just my skill? It's a bit of an exaggeration, but if you have skills and resources, mental resources, you're infinitely going to be able to live a better life, because in times when they're not absolutely essential, when someone's there to help you, you can engage in the active process of looking after yourself, of looking after your life, and training your mind to be proactive and not be lazy. Something that I emphasize currently in my psychotherapy and in my content here on the podcast is that your mind interprets ideas from your actions, and sometimes you don't know exactly how your mind is affecting your actions at an unconscious level. If you practice laziness by saying, I don't need to learn this skill, someone else will take care of me, you could inadvertently then be making less effort than you could be in other areas of your life, which means you're not living life to the fullest. But if your mind is attuned to asking constantly, what can I do to make this situation better? What can I do to take care of myself? What could I be doing in this moment? Then it's actually primed to be more proactive and a more conscientious actor in other parts of your life. Constantly having your mind attuned to how you can best be approaching any situation is a good thing. It's good for the mind. And even if somebody else is helping you with your life, it's still good to have your mind constantly attuned to that. But if push comes to shove and you're in a situation where no one is able to take care of you, you have to take care of yourself, at least you have those skills and they're well rehearsed and they're ready. Something that's also important to understand is that you don't want your mind to become passive and a victim of groupthink. Groupthink is when we essentially accept ideas simply because a large enough number of people accept them. This is a false belief. Truth is not truth because a lot of people believe it. Truth is truth because it's truth. It is self-justifying. And what we often do without even realizing it is we self-pacify. Because life is so stressful and because there are so many risks in life, often we try to self-pacify by telling ourselves false narratives. We try to justify why we don't do things or why we live our lives a certain way. So sometimes us not learning to be independent and not taking an active role in our life can actually be part of a narrative we're telling ourselves of, don't worry, life isn't that dangerous, I don't need to worry about this. Because in those instances, if we were to tell ourselves life is dangerous and we need to be prepared for anything, they might actually think in advance that it would interfere with their ability to function. Often this happens to us on an unconscious level. We tell ourselves, if we think about just how dangerous life is, the stress will be unbearable. So I'll tell myself that life isn't dangerous and I will act in accordance with that to back up that belief. Now, as I'm saying this to you, deliberately and explicitly, that should scare you because we often do it without even thinking. Our minds play tricks on us. But if we instead face our fears and say, yes, life is dangerous, and yes, it is stressful, and yes, anything could happen, But I'm going to deliberately teach myself to deal with those difficult situations so that if it happens, I can do more than I would otherwise be able to and give myself a better chance of surviving. Then we develop a healthier, stronger mind. And sometimes we can teach ourselves healthy narratives by actions that may not even seem particularly relevant. Even something as simple as fixing a key ring. It's something that I did recently, actually, because I don't like to waste anything. But even something as simple as that, or even something as simple as knowing how to make an all-natural spray like I do to spray down your kitchen bench to keep it nice and clean and deodorized. If you take all those little actions and add them up and you're running your own life, then what you're telling yourself is, I'm actively contributing to my life and I'm actively learning how to deal with it. And that also can help you be more comfortable with some of the more difficult questions, like what do I do if something bad happens? How do I deal with a disaster? Now, as with almost every subject that I discuss, there are nuances to this. And sometimes trying to be too independent can actually be a maladaptive response to something that's happened. Now, when I say being too independent, what I mean is trying to be distant from others in a way that you shouldn't be. This is often seen in cases of mental illness or cases of trauma where people have had something horrific happen to them and their mind is now skewed in a way that it sees the world as inherently untrustworthy. When someone has had that experience and their mind is so attuned to that, often trying to be independent is actually a defense mechanism. It's a way to tell ourselves, the world is a dangerous place and it has hurt me, but I don't need the other people that have hurt me. I don't need to interact with them. I can survive on my own. I can do everything myself. Now, again, there are certain things, as I just said, that you should learn to do yourself, but what this can then lead to is delusion. It's the delusion that you can control everything. And that is an equally dangerous belief as the belief that I don't need to worry about learning these skills because someone else will take care of me. If you think you can control everything, a number of things could happen. You may delude yourself into thinking that you have controlled something adequately when in reality that event is controlling you. Or when you encounter something that you can't control, it could lead to a mental health breakdown. It can lead you to disengage from other people, which is unhealthy because we are designed by nature to be social animals. And you see a lot of people who isolate themselves and have difficulty forming relationships because they have learned the world is so untrustworthy that it's better for me to be able to survive entirely on my own. And often these people can be incredibly independent. They do know how to take care of themselves and they are surviving, but they're not thriving. And deep down, they're incredibly upset, disturbed, miserable at the world. Deep down, they're yearning for something. They're yearning for connection for others, but they have such an ingrained tendency to want to avoid people because they've had so many instances or such a horrific instance of being let down by the world that they're too scared to approach others. It's not their fault. And as a trauma survivor, I can tell you exactly how that feels. For me anyway. It's not an easy journey. When you've had the world do horrible things to you, who can really blame you for wanting to survive on your own? But that's an example of how everything needs to be taken in context and we have to have nuanced thinking about things in order to deal with them effectively. So like all virtues, independence must be taken in balance. But at the start when I said independence in the right form, I meant independence in the right form is always good. Independence can become maladaptive, but in the right form it is crucial. And it concerns me how much we don't teach it. We don't teach these types of skills in schools often. A lot of parents don't teach their children how to do these things. And hey, I'm still learning. I am an independent individual, but I'm always open to learning new skills about how I can best deal with the world. All of us can still learn. And of course, there are certain things that you shouldn't do yourself. Don't ever do your own electrical work and don't ever do your own plumbing. Mistakes in those regards can lead to people being injured or even killed, so use your brain. But part of being wise means knowing where the line is and being able to discern what you can do for yourself and what you should do for yourself. And often, we should be doing a lot more for ourselves than what we actually are doing. Consult with someone you trust and learn. It is absolutely possible for you to learn independence. Take it one step at a time and gradually build it up, and eventually it'll become second nature. So thank you for joining me for this episode. As per usual, for any information or to address any concerns of your own, please never take what you find on the internet as advice. seek advice from someone you trust or from a professional. And if you're interested by something that you've heard on the program, or you would like to be a guest or a collaborator, please contact me. I would love to hear from my audience. And until next time, take care.